Okay, we're going to take a look at reflections today. So on your notes, take a look for the part that has the empty boxes. So in our first box, we have action. Then we've got words. And finally, algebra. Okay, for the action, what happens is a reflection, a shape, line, or point flips. Over a given line. Okay, so the shape is going to flip. It's a mirror, a reflection is just a mirror image. Okay, in words, the directions you're going to see are going to be, it'll say reflect over the x-axis will be one option. The y-axis will be another option. Or you might be given a line. So once in a while you're given the equation of a line, but usually it's either the x-axis or the y-axis. So those will be the instructions that you're given. Now the algebra we're going to come back to because there's something I want you to see first before we start looking at the algebra part of it. Okay, so pause and get anything copied you need because we're clearing it out. All right. Next up, let's take a look at a few reflections here. Our first picture up on the left is an x-axis reflection. So if I click my shape, this is my shape reflecting over the x-axis. Okay, so again, reflecting over the x-axis. So what you'll see is that the x-axis is representing like the mirror. So the mirror reflection is happening right here over the x-axis. So what we have is if this point is 2 above the x-axis, the reflection will create a point 2 below the x-axis. So if it was 2 above, it's now 2 below. This point over here was 4 above. Now it's going to be 4 below. So if we take a look down here, our pre-image, our first point was at, we'll say 1, 2, and our second point, so I'm looking at the blue one, my second point was -3, 4. Okay, we'll call this A and B. So A was 1, 2, and B was 3, 4. So my image of A became 1, -2. And my image of B became -3, -4. So something I want you to notice is I want you to compare your x coordinates and your y coordinates in between the pre-image and the image. What do you notice? Is there something similar or different about the x coordinates? How about the y coordinates? Okay, so what happens to the x coordinate? X coordinate stays the same. The y coordinate, now the first thought is, okay, well if it's a 2, it becomes a -2, it becomes negative. Well now what happens if we reflected the other way? If it was at a -2, the new point would be at a +2. So it doesn't always necessarily mean it's going to be negative. What we're going to write is the opposite. Your y coordinate is going to become the opposite of what it was. So my y coordinate becomes the opposite. If it was positive, now it's negative. If it was negative, now it's positive. Let's take a look at our next one. If this reflects over the y-axis, take a look and see what's happening as it reflects over the y-axis. So in this case, my y is the reflection point. Okay. Over the y. So if we call this point A and this point B, let's get our ordered pairs. We're going to do this in a little bit of a different order. So A, the ordered pair is 3, 3. B is 1, 1. Now for my image, if you're unsure what's going to happen, let's just look at our points. Well, my B was to the right one, so my new B is going to be to the left one. My A was to the right 3, now it's going to be to the left 3. So my reflection, again, my y value is the same, but my x is going to become the opposite. So now what I have is I have the x value staying the same, the y value staying the same, and the x value becomes the opposite. Take a look at my ordered pairs. So when it reflects over the y-axis, the x stays the same. Oh gosh, sorry. When it reflects over the y-axis, our x becomes the opposite, and our y stays the same. Okay, the reason this is happening is when we reflect over the x-axis, it's a vertical movement. If you look at our shape for the reflecting over the x-axis, it's a vertical movement. It's a movement for up and down, and that's why the y-coordinate changes. For our reflection over the y-axis, this is a vertical movement. It's a left to right movement, so that is why our x-coordinate changes. Okay, so hit pause and get that copied. And let's go to our next page. All right, let's take a look at this example. We're going to reflect over the x-axis. Hold off on the algebra words for a second. Now I want you to notice we're reflecting over the x-axis, which is right here. And you'll see that my shape crosses over. All right, it's a little bit tricky, but not too bad. What we want to look at here is when we're reflecting, we want to focus on our coordinates. So let's just focus on the corners here. And we'll call this A, B, C, and D. What I want you to focus on is not anything other than pick a point and reflect it. Okay, so I'm going to pick B, and I'm going to reflect it over the x-axis, and it's going to go here. So B was 1 above, now it's going to be 1 below. C was 1 above, now C is going to be 1 below. A was 3 below, now it's going to be 3 above. D was 3 below, now it's going to be 3 above. And here's my new shape. Now let's go ahead and write our coordinates. For my first shape, it was A, B, C, and D. My coordinates for A were -1, -3. B was -2, 1. C was -3, 1. And C was -4, excuse me. And D is -5, -3. Okay, now let's take a look at our new shape, our image. And A is now -1, +3. B is -2, -1. C is -4, -1. And D is -5, +3. So we reflected over the x-axis, and let's take a look at what happened. My x's stayed the same. Look at my y's. Did every single y become the opposite? Sure did. So our algebra, our x stays the same, our y becomes the opposite of y. It's a little bit trickier because our shape crossed over through the x-axis, but if you just focus on reflecting point by point, it's not bad at all. Hit pause, get that copied, and we'll try another one. All right. Now our last one is kind of a multiple situation here. I'm going to get you started and have you try to finish. Number 1, reflect the figure over the x-axis. Okay, so for number 1, I'm going to take each point. It definitely helps to draw dots at each corner just to help you focus. So if my first point here is 2 below, I'm going to go 2 above. And the other thing that helps is labeling. That way you can keep track of what is what. So my new D, E was 4 below, so now my new E is going to be 4 above. G is 2 below, so my new G is going to be 2 above. And my F was 4 below, so now my F will be 4 above. Okay. The other thing to do is label that number 1 because that matches our work for number 1. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to translate this shape. So it says then translate using x plus 2, y minus 4. So each of my points are going to go to the right 2 and down 4. So if I start with D here, I'm going to go to the right 2 and down 4 and put, that's my new D. And I would actually put 2 apostrophes. Okay, for E, I'm over 2, down 4. So that's my new E. F, to the right 2, down 4. And G, to the right 2 and down 4. And see, now it's starting to get a little bit confusing. It took me a second to just double check that I was doing everything correctly. Here's my new shape, and I'm calling that number 2. Okay. Now I want you to try number 3, and let's see if you get the same thing that I get. So try number 3 with me. Pause if you need to. Phew. All right, there we go. Let's see how you did. That's a tricky one, but not too bad. That's all. Hit pause if you need to. Okay, so let's head back to the chart that you have on your paper. We left our algebra section out. And what we'll find in this section, this is where we look at when the coordinates had, the x and the y become something else kind of a thing. So what we're going to do is, as of right now, you'll see 2 different situations. You'll see reflect, you'll see reflection over the x-axis and reflection over the y-axis. And it's going to be different from each that you have. So let's change my color here. So what's going to happen if it reflects over the x-axis, if you take a look back at all of the times we reflected over the x-axis, what you noticed happening was the x stayed the same and the y became the opposite. And when we reflected over the y-axis, Reflected over the y-axis, we got the opposite of x, and the y stayed the same. Okay, so this would be the algebra if you were asked to write down the coordinate changes. This is what we would write. That's it.